All right, it is officially UFC 259 fight week, and with this massive event coming up on Saturday featuring a trifecta of world championship bouts, it felt apropos to bring back on the legend, the play-by-play voice of the Ultimate Fighting Championship to break it all down. So let us say hello once again to Jon Anik, kind enough to join us once again back home in Florida. How are you, sir?
I am well, Mike Heck. It's good to be with you. And big month. We don't always have two domestic pay-per-views in a month. So we're excited. And UFC 259, obviously, to your point, is a pretty big one.
First off, before we get into Saturday, I saw a photo. I saw a social media post that you are taking your training to another level, working with the great Phil Daru, who is obviously the strength and conditioning guru for many of high-level fighters. Jacked Jon Anik coming our way, perhaps? This is pretty cool.
I don't know about all that noise. I mean, this dude started asking me about my diet, and I was getting a little bit freaked out. I've cleaned up my diet, though, but yeah, I've been working with a couple of different guys down here. Phil Daru certainly, and Gilbert Burns for Christmas actually got me 3 training sessions with his guys at the Institute of Human Performance down here. So, see, I don't know if I should take this as like a message from the MMA community that all these South Florida-based traders are trying to get me in the gym. But in terms of functionality, I do feel stronger. And a lot of level changes when you're a parent of young children. So I'm feeling stronger, and I'm not taking an amateur fight, Cub Swanson, but I'm feeling stronger.
Well, there you go. That's good stuff. I wanted to touch briefly on this past Saturday, if I could, because Ciryl Gane is now 8-0, went into his first main event. And I don't know if you saw this on the broadcast, but one thing that stuck out to me immediately was his composure before the fight with Jairzinho Rozenstruik began. I tweeted something to the effect of, Ciryl Gane looks like he's about to take a leisurely stroll around the neighborhood on the first nice day of the year. He was just so relaxed. And I thought that attitude, that mentality was so important, especially with how the fight played out overall. What did you make of Gane's performance and his composure heading in?
I agree with what you said, and candidly, I probably should have acknowledged as much on the broadcast because I got that same sentiment from him in our fighter meeting. And I hadn't seen him fight live until the Junior Dos Santos fight. So you get a different read on a guy when you get the face-to-face in the Zoom meeting or otherwise, and you get to spend a little bit of time around him. And then, of course, watching him compete live, you get a better understanding as to just how high his ceiling may be. I think he can be the total package. I think certainly he's a developing mixed martial arts athlete. But in terms of the mental stuff and the ability to handle everything that comes with fighting that isn't, fists and knees and chokes, I agree. He passed those tests with flying colors. And again, when you can fight another credentialed heavyweight and win 50 to 45 times 3 and not have a scratch on you, you're doing something right. So I'm excited to see the next one. And there are going to be guys that are going to really force him and push him in different ways. And I'm excited to see him take those challenges.
I guess I understand how some of the fans reacted to the fight, but I also thought it was mega important for him to have that extra time in the cage. Yeah, he could have gone out there and stopped Jairzinho in 2 minutes, but the fact that he went 25 minutes and got that full main event feel, I think that's going to pay more dividends down the road than had he just finished him in 2 minutes. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I think so, too. I also think, though, there are different 25-minute fights. So I think if you're Francis Ngannou fighting Stipe, I thought those 25 minutes maybe carried more value in a loss than these 25 could in a win, which might sound a little bit crazy, but these weren't particularly fast-paced 25 minutes. And again, I don't think cardio is going to be an issue for Gane. It was a big issue for Rozenstruik, and it's not like I can go run 6, 7, 8 miles, but I can't fight 25 minutes like that. I can't, shadow box for 25 minutes necessarily. So I have respect for the cardiovascular strength on both sides, but I don't know. I don't want to overstate the value of going the distance because, man, he treated it like a sparring session. He was laughing, having fun out there. And I think that's good in its own respects. But I don't know. I think it was an interesting fight for us to call for sure. I'll leave it at that.
Fair enough. I did want to give some shine to Ronnie Lawrence because he's a guy I've been following since he was on the regional scene, and he looked amazing in his octagon debut against Vince Cachero. That pace he puts on is just outrageous. And he has little pieces to his game that a lot of great 35ers sort of bask in. He's got that footwork and movement of a Cruz and a Dillashaw, but he also has a bit of Merab Dvalishvili in him with that suffocating pressure in wrestling. And we've seen great debuts before, Jon. You've called a bunch of them, but I feel like the ceiling is super high on a guy like Ronnie Lawrence. What did you see sitting octagon side?
Yeah, I saw all of that. I mean, this division, right? Can we just talk about that? I mean, Ricky Simone and Merab Dvalishvili and Ronnie Lawrence. I mean, these are some of the most watchable, most offensive fighters in the sport. And good on UFC President Dana White for being front and center, despite the fact that he didn't get a finish on the Contender Series, acknowledging him as somebody who is special and somebody from whom he expects big things. That was wholly accurate from the Prez. He's great. I mean, he's great. He's well coached. He's his own harshest critic. And he really, despite not having amateur wrestling in his background, it seems to be a pretty good base for him, and he can go to that if need be, but also is a tremendous striker. He's going to need every one of those skills, as you know, and then some to survive in these shark-infested UFC bantamweight waters. But couldn't have got much better for Ronnie Lawrence. And again, when you're unsatisfied with a win like that against a guy in Vince Cachero, who was sort of in desperation mode coming off a loss in his UFC debut, new camp, figured to have gotten the best version of Vince Cachero, and look what he did with him. So, yeah, chips to the center of the table for me, too, on Ronnie Lawrence.
How would you describe calling Pedro Munoz versus Jimmy Rivera 2 inside the Apex?
It's insane. The whole calf kick craze is insane. It really does come down to mental toughness. I mean, if you were to poll this roster, they would tell you largely, short of getting caught so badly on the nerve that it makes you truly one-legged insofar as you can't put any pressure on it because it's numb. Other than that, man, you know, it's mental toughness that's going to power you through. And Jimmy Rivera's leg was killing him after round 1. And how he not only sustained but kept throwing offense back is something that I can't relate to from a toughness standpoint. But I think Pedro Munoz deserves a lot of credit. If you look at the body of work, there have been setbacks in big fights before, but he's never been finished as a pro. I do believe that even though he has some signature wins, Mike, for sure, Cody Garbrandt, Jimmy Rivera, others, he can, on any given Saturday night, be the best bantamweight in the world, right? His Brazilian jiu-jitsu gives you tremendous pause, especially with that guillotine. And he has so much power, a chin that is held up, loves to spar. You know, I think the fact that neither of these guys had title eliminator type stakes in this fight helps them to open up a little bit more and be less cautious. I think sometimes when maybe you're fighting for a title shot, you don't fight as well as you otherwise would. But just so much respect for these two athletes, and as clear as day as you could have for a fight of the night.
I was texting Tyson Chartier earlier today, and I was asking him about, like, if you're coaching Cater or Font or any of these guys, and you know you're fighting a guy like Munoz who throws those calf kicks so heavy, like, what do you say to, like, help defend those? And I just say, he just goes, I say, make them miss. So he says, make them miss. And you're coming out saying, I need to take one of those kicks at 50 to 60% because I just took one from Paul Felder a little while ago at 10%. Yeah. I got to see what it's like. You're a wild man. Why do you want to do this, Jon? Why do you want to do this to yourself?
Well, make him miss is good advice, right? Because at the end of the day, ultimately, that's really what you have to do, because you don't have the foresight to know what one of these singularly might do to change the complexion of the fight. So if you're a fighter, you absolutely need to figure out a way to not take one, if at all possible. And coaches approach that differently, by the way. But for me, taking one of these, I've had a lot of people, CM Punk foremost among them, tell me, dude, just don't do it, right? A lot of people are afraid I'm going to tear my ACL, Michael, if I do this, right? But no, I guess I just want to feel it. And so, like, last night I had my 7-year-old daughter, Tatum, dig in pretty deep, you know, and I actually have a better understanding now, believe it or not, than I did 12 hours prior. But no, I just think it has become such a factor in our sport, so much so that I would say 5% of the fan base right now is like, all right, enough with the goddamn calf kicks, you know, like, enough. Because, again, it becomes such a big part of the narrative of the fight that probably for us commentators, they're sick of us talking about it. But I just want to feel it, and you can be sure I have a long line. Bilal Muhammad, Gilbert Burns, Jared Gordon, Danny Chavez, the crochet boss Maurice Green, and myriad others have all offered to kick this little scumbag in the calf. So it's probably going to happen, and hopefully they'll go 25 to 30 and not 50 to 60%.
There you go. Well, let's take a look at Saturday night, UFC 259. I mean, all these storylines have been kind of talked about and thrown out there. Of course, the main event, we get Jan Blachowicz defending the light heavyweight title for the first time against Israel Adesanya. I love this fight, and one of the main reasons I love it so much, yeah, there's a lot of historical significance to it, but I feel like the attitude of it overall, Jon, as to how people view it has changed quite a bit since it was announced. Like the betting odds are with Adesanya, but amongst like the fighting watching public, I'm not hearing the Adesanya is going to piece Blachowicz up narrative nearly as much as I did early on. The respect factor, I feel, as we're getting closer to the fight, is rising in the camp of Blachowicz, and rightfully so. Have you noticed kind of a similar trend as well?
I think there's some of that out there. I think some have suggested, and some did when we taped our podcast earlier today, that Adesanya might feel him out a little bit and might be a little bit in risk mitigation mode early because he's moving up to light heavyweight for the first time. Certainly Blachowicz should be confident. And I like every bit of his progression. I like every bit of his game. He's certainly not afraid to be the underdog. Most of his career, the high profile fights, almost all of them, he has been the underdog for those. But I actually feel like the underplayed storyline is Adesanya's quest at all-time greatness. I mean, Mike, he's 20-0. So I could sit here and, depending on what I was employed to do, tell you that at minus 250, there's a lot of value with him right now. And that even though it's commanding two-way action, Adesanya is maybe not getting the respect that he deserves despite being the betting favorite. So that for me is a big storyline, 20-0 in modern day mixed martial arts, and trying to preserve that by going up to 205 pounds is just incredible. And to see what Jan can do, because he's a cold-blooded killer, right? Ice water in the veins is a sort of your sports cliche. Jan Blachowicz is that guy. I mean, you talk about Ciryl Gane. I mean, Jan Blachowicz, give him a heart monitor walking out there. I mean, dude is ready to go. I guarantee you he is beyond ready to go on fight night, even if he's not 100%. So when Joe Rogan talks about this being one of the fights that he's most looking forward to in a 25-year career, that's not promotional hyperbole at all.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of like the progression Jan's made. And as you know, like in early 2017, he loses to Patrick Cummins, and now he's lost 4 out of 5 fights. And since then, he's gone 8-1. He's the champion of the world. And if someone told me after the Patrick Cummins fight that we'd be talking about Jan Blachowicz world champion in 2020, in 2021, I probably, like, at worst would have looked at you kind of funny. But for you, just sitting there and watching this progression, what has it been like for you in your position to see what this guy has done over the last 3.5, 4 years?
Well, I would point to the fact that I've gotten to call some of his recent fights and get that valuable FaceTime on Fight Island. We got to be in the room with him. And so you just get a different idea of where a guy is compared to doing a fighter meeting by phone or doing it over Zoom. He was about to have his first child. He doesn't come in with any coaches. He comes in with his fiance, right? He is so matter of fact, technical, knows exactly what's going on in the fight, has everything in order from his cardiovascular training to his sparring partners. You're supposed to keep trending in the right direction. You know, Paul Felder is learning things about his energy system and training right now because of the COVID climate and training for triathlons that he never knew before. So in any walk of life, you still want to be improving and learning. And I think there are plenty of people in whatever your passion or job is that don't necessarily do that. And I just have a lot of respect for Jan as a professional athlete. I think he's used the experience to his benefit. You talk about being 2-4 in the UFC in Buffalo and thinking you might get cut, and now he's a world champion. So it's been methodical. It hasn't been without setbacks. But if anybody's going to be unintimidated and smartly approaching an Adesanya challenge, I think it's him. Like, I don't think he's going to go in there and be reckless.
With Adesanya, if he wins this fight, the options are so many. I mean, he could go back to 85. He could stick around at 205. You know, maybe he goes up and fights John Jones, depending on how this year plays out. I mean, do you feel like Adesanya could be that guy? Like, we've seen dual champions before, Conor and DC. We've seen Nunes kind of bounce up and down. Do you think Adesanya could do that for the men and be able to bounce up and down from 85 to 205? Like, how do you kind of see that playing out if he beats Jan Blachowicz on Saturday?
I certainly wouldn't put that past him, even though he's an undersized middleweight who we've seen weigh in as low as, I think, 183 pounds in the UFC. But I think the world's already his oyster. I think selfishly, as a commentator and a promoter, we're looking for as many title fights as possible. So I'd like him to do some stuff at middleweight, because I still think there are big fights there, whether it's a Whitaker rematch or a Till fight, or if Cannonier can build his way back, even a Costa rematch, and other guys I'm not thinking about. Gastelum could work his way to a rematch, or Manson. So I don't think the cupboard is bare. I don't think middleweight is cleaned out per se. I don't know if Izzy has had anything to say on that front. but he is special in every sense of that word. And whatever that man wants to do, I would tell him to shine on, young man.
Love that fight. Co-main event, we got Amanda Nunes defending her 145-pound title against Megan Anderson. As expected, Nunes just an astronomical favorite. I'm seeing lines as high as minus 1,400. That's a line that she has earned in her career with the line of work she's put in. But I got to tell you, John, from interviewing Megan Anderson in like her Invicta days, 2015, 2016, getting into the UFC to even last year was the last time I spoke with her. This is a different person, man. Like her outlook on the sport, on life, kind of separating herself from the negativity in the world. It's just vastly different. And giving a guy like James Krause this extra time to prepare for any fighter, Nunes or not, this is a massive benefit. I don't know. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say like Megan Anderson is a live dog or anything, but I think she's got a better chance than people are giving her on Saturday. What are your thoughts on the featherweight title fight on Saturday night?
Amanda Nunes is a friend. Obviously, she's local here in South Florida. She's the greatest of all time. But I agree with every assessment you have of Megan Anderson. I don't believe this fight is properly priced per se. I think there's value on Megan Anderson at plus 750. And sometimes I'm hesitant to take that stance as a guy who's calling the fight. But I can say it here. I mean, can we start with the fact that she's 6 feet tall, right? Doesn't have a ton in reach. I mean, it's like 3.5 inches, I think, at last check, maybe, that she has in reach. But if you're trying to come up with a recipe to beat Amanda Nunes, you certainly want a fighter who has a good head coach and a good head on her shoulders. And Megan Anderson has that. Maybe she didn't a couple years ago when she fought Felicia Spencer, but she's certainly better for having had that experience. I love what she brings to the table. I don't think she's going to be overwhelmed on the ground. Sometimes you can't quantify strength until you fight somebody. Dustin Poirier famously said going into the Khabib Nurmagomedov fight that I just don't know what he's going to feel like until I go in there. And he feels like a bear, as we found out. So I'm very curious to see how it'll play out if it does go to the ground, and my expectation is that it will. But not only is Amanda the greatest of all time because of her skills, but it's the coachability. It's the ability to execute a vision of coaches. It's the ability to not force the issue, to wait for a mistake. Even though she has all these skills, she's not going to give you a mistake. So I don't know. Maybe Megan can force Amanda to make a mistake, but if she doesn't do that, you can understand why she'd be up against it. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see the fight, as I know you are.
Do you sort of look at Nunes at this point? I mean, because she's, like you said, greatest of all time. She's done it all, dual champion. She's been unbeatable for such a long time. At this point in her career, and only she knows the answer to this question, but do you sort of look at Nunes and think, man, we only have this legend with us for so long now. Like, we feel like the end of the line is coming at some point. Let's, I guess, sort of bask in this for as long as we can.
Absolutely. And I didn't know where you were going with that question. I don't ever think motivation will be an issue when she goes out there and fights, because not unlike a George St. Pierre coming back to fight Michael Bisping, you're putting your legacy on the line in some way, shape, or form every time you fight. So I think you'll continue to get close to, if not the best version of Amanda Nunes. But my informed speculation tells me that she doesn't have that many more cuts down to 135 pounds. And I don't know that she has too many more fights. So we've all been privileged to witness the greatness and see all the history, some of us firsthand. But yeah, I mean, are you asking me like over, under 3.5 more fights for Amanda Nunes? I'm hopeful we get 4 more, but I don't know, man. She's done it all, and she's gone through a lot of championship training camps. And eventually, I think the body and the bank account and the family will tell you to step away.
Do you buy into the narrative that Megan Anderson isn't just fighting Amanda Nunes? She's not just fighting for the title, but she's fighting for the division. Like, there's that speculation. We don't know. Obviously, we have no idea. But do you buy into that narrative? Do you think there's some truth to that at all?
I truly don't know, but I think the women's MMA game overall is in such a good place that I think there would be every effort to try to preserve a women's division right now. I can't sit here and tell you that 105 pounds long-term for the women would be more likely than 145, even though many of your listeners would probably say that it's deeper there. But I'm hopeful the division sticks around. So we'll see if Megan can maybe do something about it. But I'm hopeful that win or lose, it'll be here for the distant future.
As much, and I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it, as much as I love these 2 title fights we just talked about, Petr Yan versus Aljamain Sterling, all the feels, John, all the feels. This is a competitive delight, Jon Anik. It's pretty much a pick 'em at the betting window right now. I think there's like a slight lean on Yan, but there's a lot of title fights coming up, but I feel like this is the clear, most evenly matched, most competitive of all of them. And for like the pro wrestling marks, this is like the Intercontinental title in like the 80s and early 90s. I cannot wait for this fight, Jon. What sticks out to you with these two warriors finally locking horns?
Does your employer, MMA Fighting, make you make a selection on these fights?
I will make a selection on the fight.
Okay, but you can't reveal that right now, I assume, correct?
I'm still thinking about it. I don't know.
All right. You're sitting on the fence, but that's okay. So I'm glad I don't have to make a pick. As fascinated as you are. I mean, I would start with Aljo, from whom I've expected big things for a long time. Ray Longo is one of my best friends. He's been on my podcast since episode 1 6 years ago. So I have a pretty good feel for the inner workings of Aljo and him building to this moment in time. I also think stylistically, you can argue that it's a favorable matchup for him, and he's getting it in a 25-foot octagon as opposed to a 30-footer, which I think limits some of what can be done. I'm not sitting here telling you that Aljo can't beat Petr Yan in a kickboxing match, because I think he probably could. But I do believe that there's a clear path of least resistance for Aljamain Sterling to get to his grappling and get to his wrestling and his submission game. And for Petr Yan, he's held up very well when people have tested that skill from him. He has been unbelievable in the UFC. 7-0, must-see TV every step of the way. Some of the best boxing you've ever seen. And again, has those defensive skills and the heart, the mental toughness, the cardio, total package. So I think the fight is properly priced. I can't wait to see it. Again, they're going to get two-way action on both of these guys. I will say most of the fighters that I talk to seem to be backing Aljamain Sterling, even if it's a 60% majority. And I would also tell you that the Aljo people seem more convicted than the Yan people. But I had a handicapper on my show this morning, and he was bullish about Petr Yan at this price, what he's done from a defensive grappling standpoint in his UFC career. So, yeah, man, you set it up well. I know you're not burying the lead. This is the fight that is closest on paper. I think that's why the fans are just, jonesing to see it play out.
What is it about an Adesanya card where like some of the undercard title fights just stick out to you? Like I'm not gonna, they got big shoes to fill for Zhang Weili, Ioane, and Jacek, but I have that like same feeling I had last year. I don't know about you.
Yeah, and then we had, I guess, when Adesanya fought Gastelum, I don't know if it was before or after Poirier and Holloway were on that card, I believe. So, yeah, I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches, and I can't wait to see it all hold together. 15 fights. So I'm sitting here looking at 10 prelims, Mike. So it's a little bit intimidating coming off a back-to-back with the 30 fighter cards that are empty right now as we speak. Normally, I'd have 8 or 10 fighters prepped on a Monday. So we got some work to do, but I'm excited. I'm excited for Aljo too, right? Because the Marlon Moraes setback, is a 2-year setback essentially, right, in terms of your championship aspirations and trajectory. And look at the way he's built himself back up. So excited to see what the Jamaican-American, I should say, can do with the showcase. And for Petr Yan at 28, man, if he can get a defense like this against Aljo and then maybe put together a couple against some Sandhagen types, kid's well on his way. So I'm excited, man. Can't wait to get back to Vegas.
Yeah, you segued the prelims perfect. Of course, your broadcast colleague Dominic Cruz is back in there on Saturday, takes on Casey Kenny. And like you said, 135 just rules right now. But this is a great matchup. I love Dominic's attitude about the fight. I love his attitude about the placement on the card. He always just has a great vibe about the fight game. He's got his hands full with Casey Kenny, who's ready to catapult himself based on his name. This is a fight Casey's wanted for a long time. The vet and former champion versus the surging up-and-comer, as surprising as it was to see it on paper, Jon, it just feels right now, does it not?
I'm getting anxious talking about this one. I mean, Dom is really near and dear to me. We've spent so many hours together on the road, and I have learned, having called fights involving my broadcast partners, that it actually is an easier exercise for me to call the fight than to just be a friend sitting home. So I'm excited to call it. I'm excited that Dom has had the training camp that he didn't have necessarily for the Cejudo fight, not taking anything away from C4. But Dominic has the rounds now. He has the health over 3 or 4 months. So now he has the confidence, I think, that dovetails with that type of training camp. And I think his style sort of dictates that he needs those rounds and those weeks. So I'm excited to see what version of Dominic Cruz we will see. Is he as fast? Does he move as well as he did in his fighting prime? Can he still make a championship run? We didn't answer those questions in the Cejudo fight. So Dominic Cruz is going to answer those questions because he's fighting a guy in Casey Kenny who, candidly, with 3 straight wins, the way he's done it, deserves to be the betting favorite. And I know a lot lot of people are surprised, and people are saying, oh, back up the Brinks truck for Dominic Cruz as an underdog. Well, those people aren't necessarily putting their money where their mouths are, because the betting line is holding steady right now. So Casey Kenny deserves all of the respect that he is getting. He deserves this fight, despite the fact that I don't believe he has a number next to his name. I'm excited to see what he can do. He's the total package. I think Dominic likes that he's got some Tucson, Arizona roots. Guys like Dominic Cruz and Nathan and Nick Diaz, they want to give fights to guys who they think deserve it for more reasons than one. And Dominic Cruz was happy to sign on the dotted line, and we'll see what he can do against Casey Kenny. If Dom is going to get back to the championship place, it's a must-win.
You Rogan, is DC the third man in the booth here?
Yes, sir. Breaking news, MMAfighting.com.
Oh yeah. Last thing, and by the way, it's nice to look ahead to this card, and we could put the damn Oklahoma bathroom fight behind us and focus on some title fights. But Fight Island in January. I mean, this year's been fascinating so far. We've had the big moments. We've had Poirier, big win. Chiesa, nice win. Kamaru Usman gets the title win over Gilbert Burns. But you had some significantly high praise for one Max Holloway in his performance against Calvin Kattar, even calling it potentially the greatest, performance you've been Octagon side for.
I mean,
wow, look at that.
I don't know. I know we got some audio only, but Ross Baines Art sent me this piece.
Wow.
Because in large part, he heard me on the air, and thank you, Ross, call it singularly the greatest performance that I have seen Octagon side. I think previously that distinction went to Colby Covington against Robbie Lawler. How Colby was able to put forth that type of offense, all those takedown attempts, all those strike attempts over 25 minutes was a sight to behold. I mean, truly inhuman stuff, unbelievable output. And what Max did against Calvin Kattar was a touch better, even though I don't think he attempted a single takedown. I have never seen anything like it. I was shaking after the fight. I was shaking. Why was I shaking after the fight? I wasn't dehydrated. Was I shaking because I had to go interview Max for our Quick Hits web show after the fact? No, I just had interviewed him in the Octagon. I've never been so blown away by a performance than I was by that performance. I can't sit here and tell you why, and I know some people don't. They shun me when I try to put things into historical context, but that type of offense and execution, his coaches don't get enough credit, and maybe he doesn't get enough credit either. But signature performance for him, despite the fact that a belt was not on the line, and couldn't have better things or higher praise to say, about that guy.
And then that performance in front of fans, man, like they were all over that thing. What was that? I mean, first main event in front of fans in a long time, man. And to deliver that performance, what was that night like for you?
It was so great to see fans in the building for so many reasons. And we actually had hockey boards in between us and them. So I was hoping to have more contact with them than I was able to have. But we could talk to them, which was cool. And so I was trying to go back and forth with them and scream my lungs out with them off camera, obviously. But just so appreciative that people would spend their money and go in that climate and have to be reminded by me over the PA to put their masks back on because, a lot of them were putting them below the nose at times. But it was great to have fans back in the building. And I don't know, oftentimes these shows go by and we find ourselves asking our fellow broadcasters, man, like when is this Apex even going to be filled with fans? Like when? And I don't know, man. I'm not as ambitious as I was that it's going to be 2021, but we'll see. But yeah, they definitely added to that fight. And for Max, I'm glad he had that type of backdrop.
Absolutely. You are the man, Jon. I appreciate the time as always. I cannot wait for Saturday. Enjoy the fight week build and the card and all of that stuff, man. All the best to you. Life is good, right? Life is good.
Dude, life is really good. I mean, these pay-per-views are so exciting for us as fans. The fact that we get paid to whatever degree to talk about them is pretty special. So, yeah, man, wheels up to Las Vegas, and hopefully this 15-fighter holds together.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, buddy.